Whenever someone asks me whether I believe Bigfoot is real, or Sasquatch as we call him in Canada, the hairy wild giant of North America, despite a lack of universally recognized forensic evidence and a dearth of convincing pictures and videos, I always say that I think there must be something to it because of all the people who claim they've seen it. A lot of times people who are very familiar with the wilderness and with wildlife, who know better, who claim they've seen it. I've met one of these people accidentally one time. I did a video on that. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link in the description. And also because I get all these comments from people who claim they've had personal experiences with the Sasquatch. And what I find really compelling is when those sightings correspond with some of the old native legends that I read about and some of the old frontier accounts that I read about. So in this video, we're going to check out, I'm not sure if we're going to make this a pan-American thing or just do the western half. I might just do the western half of the U.S.A. and then do the eastern half in another video. We'll see. But yeah, in this video for sure, we're going to do Sasquatch stories that I've received on my channel from commenters who live in the United States. So we're going to start way in the northwest of the United States, in the state of Washington, which seems to have the most comments from the western half of the states. So let's check them out. First comments from Squatch, Pacific Northwest, 2331, 4 years ago. I know Sasquatch is real. I swear it till the day I die. While hiking up along the White River in Washington State, the sun had just gone down, but with the moonlight we could see the trail just fine. Shortly after, something started following us back in the trees off the right side of the trail. It followed for a while. I thought it was a black bear. The footsteps it made sounded almost unmistakably bipedal, but figured there was no way it was a man. Too dark and thick back in the trees. It started throwing small sticks and stones. One stick, 7 to 8 inches long, almost hit me in the face. I started yelling there was someone back there, and creeped out we decided to leave. We got almost all the way back, stopping maybe 200 yards from the truck to take a break. Something from the tree line growled tremendously at us, so we ran for the truck. But something ahead of us, back in the trees off the left side of the trail, charged at us, crashing through and breaking everything in its path. It sounded like a bull charging at us. It stopped 400 feet or so from reaching the trail, and we ran right by it, never seeing it. It was too dark, but we never stopped running. We got to the truck and burned rubber. So this story reminds me, it's very, very evocative of and consistent with some of the oldest Wildman stories that I've seen in Canada. So the thing where it's throwing sticks and rocks at people, that is exactly the sort of thing that the Dene from up north say that they're Nakani, as they call him, or that's one of the words they have for him. That's one of the things he does. He'll come in the nighttime and throw sticks and rocks at their campfire or at their tent. And stone throwing and the charging also evokes some of the oldest stories that J.W. Burns, he was an Indian agent for the Chehalis Reserve, kind of northeast of Chilliwack. And that's where the word Sasquatch comes from his writings. He would talk to the local Chehalis who have all these stories about Sasquatch, and he kind of anglicized their native word for it, which, if you read his writings, is based off of a letter that a native named August Point, I think, sent to him regarding a Sasquatch that he saw on a railroad near Agassiz, British Columbia. But a lot of the stories that J.W. Burns got from his Chehalis friends talk about Sasquatch throwing stones, usually big boulders at canoes, never hitting them, but kind of like it's a warning. They're throwing them right next to these canoeists. And stories of Sasquatch charging at people, but never reaching them. So like I said, how I find stories so much more compelling when they accord with the old tales that I research. This is absolutely one of them. Next one's Alan HYT 79, 3 years ago. I heard plenty of Sasquatch stories where I grew up in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington, U.S.A. Some of them are old, and some of them are fairly contemporary. I laughed them off as being either lies or the products of fertile imaginations, since I was into science and reason while a nerdy kid. One very hot day in the late 1970s, some of my friends and I took the afternoon off from school and went to the Hoh rainforest. We hiked a ways down the Hoh River Trail, then took a left turn off-trail into the woods. Looking for a nice, quiet, and lonely spot to sit, we crossed small, mossy meadows between stands of moss-covered trees. It was certainly quiet. In fact, it was dead silent. No insect or bird sounds at all. Then we started smelling a terrible stench. Sulfur, garlic, carrion, landfill smells all mixed together. About half a mile in, or about 1 kilometer, We came upon a beautiful little meadow that had a dry moss to sit upon. We sat in a circle and passed out beers. I started cleaning seeds and stems from some weed and was going to roll a joint. One of our friends was a member of the Quileute Nation. I probably pronounced that wrong. And she has started to put together the pieces. We should leave, she said. I looked around at everyone, then noticed a face looking down at me from behind a mossy tree. The face was about 12 to 14 feet, or 4+ meters, up, and looked hairy with intelligent eyes. It blinked and seemed to regard us with curiosity. I didn't get a sense of danger, but I did feel like we were in a place we absolutely did not belong. I was stunned. John, the guy next to me, saw it too. There's a Bigfoot, he said. I looked at the others to see if they were seeing it, but they weren't. I looked back and the Sasquatch was gone. We grabbed all our stuff and almost ran back to the car. John and I saw, so we believed it. Liz, a Native American, knew there was one nearby, so she believed it. But the other people with us grumbled about leaving and laughed at us when we explained why. They thought we were playing a joke on them. So if you follow Sasquatch stories, you know that the horrible stench of like armpit, onions, burning tires, garbage, rotten meat is an extremely common theme with Sasquatch stories, and it is also one of those elements that goes back to the native stories. Next one's Rick Horay, JS 5227, 3 years ago. Yes, I have a home on the mighty Hoh River in northwest Washington, down by the mouth of the river. There has been a lot of sightings of Sasquatch just on the lower Hoh Road itself. I personally have found what seemed to be a day's beds, where something obviously made a bed of ferns and hemlock boughs. I never would have even known that they were just there, except for the fact that people had reported seeing Sasquatch there. Crossing the lower Hoh Road. Every bed or nest I found was within sight of that road. Just so many similar happenings from people who never talk to each other, but have almost exactly the same story as each other, in almost the exact same place. He usually knocks a tree down, then it walks over to the gravel pit. Then the reporting party can hear him breathing heavily. Same story, same place, different times, different people that don't communicate with each other. On top of that, after questioning others in the community, patterns establish different patties involved. I believe a family of Sasquatch lives back there. I guarantee it. God bless. Was thinking about placing trail cameras in that area. I think they hear people down the road, and there's like a natural funnel that just kind of naturally goes directly across the gravel pit. Anyway, God bless you all. I agree with this guy. Something that makes these stories so compelling is when different people, who probably have no connection with each other, tell the same story. That's one of the reasons that I think some ghost stories are so compelling, because, at a hotel or a bar or something, patrons will report to staff seeing the same sort of apparition or the same sort of experience, and to believe that they're all colluding with each other across sometimes continents of distance where they live and great periods of time kind of contradicts Occam's razor. I don't know if that's the way you say it, but it seems too much of a stretch to hold any water, if that makes sense. If you'd like to watch this video without ads, please consider becoming a member of this channel and watching the ads-free version instead. You can do this on your phone or desktop by clicking the picture of my face and then clicking the join button to the right of the subscribe button. For only $2 Canadian per month, or about $1.45 US, you can watch my members-only videos and get an icon of a little Canadian monster beside your name every time you post a comment on my channel, which will change with the amount of time you've been a member. Since times are tough, I've decided to add a lower membership tier, which will give you access to my members-only videos for only $1 Canadian per month, or about 72 American cents. For my viewers in Madagascar who can't afford this, I apologize. Sorry for the interruption, and enjoy the video. Next one is Club Stompers 3 years ago. A sheriff stationed in Greenwater, Washington, near Mount Rainier, told me a very similar story. He said he was driving down a Forest Service road he just opened for the first time in 10 years. He was about 15 miles down the road when he saw what he thought was a man in a brown sleeping bag 200 feet away on the side of the road. He thought, what the hell is someone doing way out here? As he got closer, it took one step and jumped across the road and grabbed a tree branch in the air with one arm and flung itself up onto a cliff, then proceeded to run straight up an almost vertical hillside and then out of sight. He pulled over to look at the area, and him being 6'6" himself, said there was no way he could jump up and even touch the 12-foot-high branch, let alone do it from 200 feet away, and throw himself up onto a 15-foot-tall cliff. He said, that's when I realized this was no man in a sleeping bag. And the ability to scale cliffs kind of accords with the old native stories that say that these things live in the mountains, which one would suppose would be a sort of requisite skill for something that lived in an environment like that. Next one's Rick Horay JSI 1121 2 years ago. So this guy, he just commented, didn't he? We just covered his comment. Right. Talking about the different stories in the Whole River. What does he say here? Excellent video. I seen a Sasquatch last January in Whole River, Washington, and I waited 3 weeks to tell anyone. Finally, I told Officer Suggs. He is the chief of police on the Hoh Indian Reservation. He told me that another fella had reported seeing a Sasquatch about 2 weeks before my encounter in the same place. On November 7th of this year, approximately 250 yards from the sighting, another fella I know, named Rod Hatch, was chased by the Sasquatch. He said that he hid in a stump until daylight. He said that the Sasquatch was searching for him all night. I believe him, and also believe it's just a matter of time before something bad happens down there in the Lower Hoh River Indian Reservation. It's in northwest Washington. I've been trying to contact people who will listen to the about this matter. The kids hear them talking during the night behind the tribal housing area. Others have heard them talking during the day in the same area. They are there and very active past few years. I guarantee it. Anyone have any ideas who I can contact who might want some information, please call or message me, because I joke you not that they are there. The whole village knows about it. God bless. So 3 years ago, he's talking about people in the area have seen it, and now he's seen it himself. Oh, and he's got a couple more comments here. So Rick Horay, JSI 1121, 3 years ago. Sasquatches exist in Lower Hoh Indian Reservation in Washington State. They are there and everyone knows that they are living in and around the reservation. I seen one cross the Lower Hoh Road 11:30 p.m. at night during a storm. That was last January, on November 7th of this year. One Sasquatch chased my friend and he hid in a stump until daylight. He said that it was searching for him all through the night. Needless to say, he is really scared of those Sasquatches. I've been trying to find someone who investigates Bigfoot reports because there's evidence all over that place. So consistent with his other comments, but I think I didn't get the timeline right here. And I think he's got one more comment here. Oh, okay, this is 3 years ago. He says, I've had 6 encounters with Sasquatch. He stole my deer and was screaming at me and my cousin. Another time he was throwing rocks into the Hoh River, Washington, and was following me down the Lower Hoh Road 2 days in a row. Finally, in January 2022, I seen one cross the Lower Hoh Road 11:30 p.m. at night during a storm. He looked directly at me and walked into the brush and didn't come back out. Guarantee they are living in Hoh River, Washington, right around the reservation. So, according with his older comments, except now he says he's seen 6 Sasquatch. Next one is Stevie Champagne 3 years ago. I encountered a Sasquatch in the North Cascade Mountains August 18th, 2021. I have a 17-second video of it on my channel, but that's only the tip of the story. I was always a believer, but seeing one from 60 yards away while alone in a mountain changed my life forever. I think they are more than animals. There is some different about them. It was a defining moment of my life. 1 year plus later, and I still think about it nearly every single day. So I want to see if I can find this video that he's talking about, but before we do, let's just read some more of his comments, because I've got more of his comments saved on here. So Stevie Champagne 3 years ago. I saw one with my eyes last summer in the North Cascade Mountains off the coast of Lake Diablo. It changed my life. When I turned around and my eyes locked onto its eyes, it was like I entered a trance. It was hypnotic, awesome, and terrifying all at the same time. My God, I don't think they're just animals. There's something more intelligent to them. And that idea that there's something more intelligent about them accords with both the old native stories and the old kind of frontiersman stories. I did a video on this. It took me way too long to for this to click for me, but they all say that they're humans. They're humans that went into the wild and transformed into what they are now. So I'll put a link to that video if you want to watch it in the description. So Lake Diablo, I've heard about that. I got to say, my American Bigfoot lore is not much, but I feel like I've heard that Lake Diablo is supposed to have sightings around there. If you know more about that, please let me know. And the comment about being in a trance is another thing that accords with old native legends. I'm sure the interior Salish had this belief that it could put people in a stupor or a trance or put them to sleep. The Thompson for sure believed that, and interior Salish people. I know that from the Ruby Creek story, which is a famous story from kind of the Agassiz-Harrison Valley area, where Jeannie Chapman, a Chehalis woman, fled her house with her kids when a Sasquatch came And she had held out a blanket in front of to shield the kid's eyes from the Sasquatch's gaze because it was supposed to be bad medicine, which I guess isn't exactly a trance, but I've absolutely read the trance thing before in old native ethnologies. Okay, and here's another comment 2 years ago from Stevie Champagne. The North Cascades is where I had my encounter on August 18th, 2021. Sourdough Mountain off the shore of Lake Diablo. It was massive, and when I turned and spotted it, it stared into its eyes. And when I turned and spotted it and stared into its eyes, it was hypnotic, as if I was in a trance. Such a mysterious creature/phenomena. The wilderness of North America still holds the magic that has disappeared in our urban lives. And last comment from Stevie Champagne 11 months ago. In 2021, I encountered a Sasquatch in the middle of the North Cascades, and after my visual encounter, I somehow became disoriented and lost the trail and was wandering around for an hour. I was about to fall off a cliff that I couldn't see when a roar shook my whole body and turned me left, and I eventually scrambled in fear and found the trail down below. I was maybe 3 to 4 yards away from falling to my death or serious bodily injury. So this kind of suggests that they're friendly to humans and tried to save his life. Very interesting. Okay, let's see if we can find that video. So I'm going to have to edit this in post-production to try to sync up my screen with what I'm watching here because I'm not screen recording this right now. So Stevie Champagne, look, he's got a little green man, the European Wildman, on his as his avatar. This guy's left some very, very kind comments for me over the years, which I'm very appreciative of. Let's go to his videos. Here it is, Sasquatch Encounter Video, Original plus Stabilized. Let's have a look. Oh, I've definitely seen this before. I think Stevie might have emailed me. Yeah, that's definitely something. Kind of reminds you of the Patterson-Gimlin film a little bit. Very interesting. So I have definitely seen this before. If this is from an email that you sent me, Stevie, that I've somehow misplaced, I apologize. But it's possible that I just, from your old comment, clicked on your profile and watched it, and forgot to say anything about it. So anyways, if anybody wants to watch the original video, I'll link to it in the description. Okay, now we have Chris Aguilar, 6699. Oh, I forgot a line. This is at Stevie Champagne's last comment. He says, this happened on 8/18/21. So that's August 18th, 2021. And I still think about it nearly every day. It's the strangest yet most fortunate day of my life. Next comment is Chris Aguilar, 6699. Another long-time, very kind commenter. After years of wondering what Ape Canyon looked like, I finally made the hike in 1986. I was surprised that one comes on the canyon edge suddenly, and it's quite a drop. I went a second time in 1990. Finally had my own encounter in 1993. The only thing that surprised me was that it took so long. I never thought that Sasquatch would become a popular thing 50-odd years ago. I prefer the Chinook jargon word, skookum. Thanks. This is the best channel on YouTube. Thank you very much. So Ape Canyon is a place kind of, I think, on the foot of Mount St. Helens in Washington, the big volcano. And it's a site of one of the old classic American Bigfoot stories, where a group of prospectors claimed that they were besieged by Sasquatch that threw rocks at their cabin in response to one of them being shot over top of this cliff that Chris is referring to. This is an edit post-production. I just wanted to say that Chris's use of the word skookum in reference to the Sasquatch of Ape Canyon is very interesting because the first time that the word skookum, which is a Chinook jargon word which means powerful or impressive, the first time it was applied to the wild men of North America was by Paul Kane, who was an Irish-Canadian painter who traveled with the Hudson's Bay Company on their Transcontinental Brigade route, which goes all the way from what is now Thunder Bay, Ontario, on the western banks of Lake Superior, all the way across the continent to, I think it was originally Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River, but I think Paul Kane went down to Fort Vancouver on the Columbia, and then he went down to Astoria, up to Vancouver Island. But anyway, and I'm sure Chris knows this because he sounds like he's very knowledgeable in his Bigfoot lore and literature. But Paul Kane, in his travel memoirs, wrote that the natives never went to Mount St. Helens because they were afraid of the skookums that lived there. And I think the natives he talked to applied that word to both these weird aquatic monsters that lived in a lake at Mount St. Helens and to the wildmen that lived there. He called them skookums. And he said that any Indians who went there would disappear and be eaten by them. So I thought that was very fitting. refer to the Ape Canyon Wildman as skookums. Okay, now we're moving into Oregon. This comment's from Memomorph 5375 3 years ago. I was house-sitting north of Skyline Boulevard in Portland, Oregon, and heard the biggest scream/yell ever. It echoed for a mile or more. It started low, and then ran up in pitch and volume. At first I thought it could be the brakes of a log truck, but it happened again 20 minutes later, and again the next night at the same time. Weird stuff. So I've heard that Sasquatch whistles are supposed to start from low and go high. I didn't know it applied to screams as well, so that's interesting. Next one's John Melland, 1 year ago, a very prolific commenter. Tracks, I've seen my first set of size 10-inch tracks on the side of the road in the western side of the Three Sisters Mountains area in Oregon. I've seen quite a few since, near John Day and Granite, Oregon area. 18 inches, 16 inches, and 14 inches different tracks of sabe around our campsite and our minivan we were camping in. My ex heard them that night, walking around but was too afraid to move or wake me. I feel protected, and somehow marked or tagged, and they find me, and my ex. She's seen one 7.5 miles from Austin Junction, Oregon. Over a dozen red eyes bioluminescent in the bushes and tree line one night, near Canyon City, Oregon. I was blasting Shoshone powwow music loud. 207 Main Street, Canyon City, Oregon. I saw my first Sasquatch, sabe, and I was so excited. Thank you for sharing all your videos. Awesome. So the red eyes reminds me so much of up north the Nakani stories. The Nakani is the Dene Wildman. They're supposed to have red eyes. And this bit of information was collected by a guy named Michael H. Mason, who was, I guess you'd call him an adventurer, and he wrote a book called Through the Arctic Forests, and spent time with a lot of the natives, and he, I think, was the first one to write about the Nakani's red eyes. And this little piece of information kept on being repeated throughout the 20th century in different articles about the Nahanni Valley up north, which, according to the legends, has a connection with the Nakani. Okay, now we're into California. This comment's from eDaddy KK 2 years ago. I saw a Sasquatch between Seabury and Pyramid Lake on the north side of the Trinity River. It was just standing next to a big redwood watching me fish. I thought it was fake until it stepped behind the tree and kept peeking around it at me. I didn't stay very long. Edited in Northern California. Next one's Snoopoo 2601 2 years ago. I believe it. The one I saw in Northern California off a logging road, camping, looked just like a wild man. He wasn't hairy like everyone else's encounter. The one I saw was huge. I didn't get a good look at his face. What I noticed the most is the way he walked fast. Took him seconds to cross the dirt road and walk up a steep hill like a goat. A human would have had to use his hands and feet to walk up the hill, if they could even climb it. So that reminds me of the story about the Sasquatch seen on the Washington logging road. I know a tribe of Native Americans stayed hidden away for many years, hiding from Europeans that killed off most of their tribe. Only one had survived. Weak and tired, he tried to get some horse grain from a stable, as when he got discovered. Long story short, he lived in U.C. Berkeley for many years. They built a habitat that looked like his village for him to live on campus to study him. After years of Europeans studying him, when he passed away, they never knew his name. They called him Eshi. You can find a movie or documentary on him. Okay, I've never heard of that story before. Very interesting. I gotta check that out. And like I said, so many of the native stories and the old frontiersman stories believe that the Sasquatch, or wild man, whatever you want to call it, is a human being gone wild. Okay, now we're moving into the American Southwest. This is from Mark Burchett, 8740, 3 years ago. Skinwalker Ranch is 2 hours from my driveway. There is plenty of accessible area near it that has a very high strangeness as well, because of the private property of Skinwalker now owned by the gentleman in Salt Lake. My first encounter was while hunting mule deer here in Utah at 11. My second was while pulling field guard on a battery section of self-propelled artillery at Fort Sill, Oklahoma in the early 90s. The one in Utah was more likely Patty, only male without a doubt. The one at Fort Sill wasn't as bulky and male as well. I got the distinct impression they didn't like weapons at all. So it sounds like a soldier who saw one in Utah and another one in Oklahoma. Next comment's from Mac 19760, 1 year ago. At 17, my buddy and I lived outside of Evergreen, Colorado, about 8 miles west in the mountainous foothills. We worked at a bar-restaurant combo in Evergreen. Coming home one night, we had been sitting next to a guardrail. As we went into the curve and rise, there it was. 1:45 a.m. or so. As the lights hit his back, we both knew we weren't looking at the usual suspects. At about 25 yards, it stood up and life changed forever. Mind you, this was 1977, and we had all seen the Patterson and Gimlin film. I happened to read about Patty in Argosy magazine at a barber shop where I grew up. Anyhow, my friend pissed his pants and was near tears. I can only say I was probably in shock. My friend kept creeping forward to about 15 yards. I don't even think he realized it. He finally stops, and as I reach for the door handle, this being in one motion glided to the center line and was still for 7 to 8 seconds, let out a breath of air, and was gone over the other side down a 150-foot drop to a large stream and disappeared into the aspens. In the end, we knew what we saw. The big fella. I finally got a hold of Wes Germer at Sasquatch Chronicles, and we talked. Episode 865, Members Only, June 25th, 2022. It felt good to tell a complete stranger and have him accept what I was saying as the truth. Took me 45 years to get that off my chest. Scott Carpenter, rest in peace, was the person who calmed my fears, and I will be forever grateful to him. Crazy to think that Scott now knows for sure what these animals are. And yes, that's my opinion, animals. 10 days after our experience, I joined the Navy. 4 days after, my friend returned home and refuses to acknowledge it happened. Thanks, Brian. Very interesting story, so if you want to hear the full story, that's episode 865 of Sasquatch Chronicles. And I'll try to put that in the description. Next one is Little Kitty 22, 9 months ago. I recently encountered a Wildman in Colorado. It was a frightening encounter. The creature was absolutely hideous. It's huge and it stalks women. It pounces when it's too late for the victim to get away. Then it abuses the women before eating them. I barely escaped with my life. Still recovering from the shock 2 months later. Yikes, that was a terrible creature. It hides out in an old abandoned cabin on the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and sometimes in abandoned mines. From there it watches to see if any women are around. It definitely prefers to eat women. It's huge and hideous, hairy and just terrible. No idea if it was a squatch or whatever it was, but Colorado is known for some creature going around in the Rockies. It lurks for folks skiing too. A lot of people that innocently went skiing in Colorado's resorts have disappeared. It's terrible. So I will say that the Dene legends of the Nakani say that it steals women. And Sasquatch have also stealed women in the Chehalis stories, recovered by J.W. Burns. And here's Little Kitty 22 again 6 months ago. Whatever the truth about Sasquatches, I encountered a terrible creature in Colorado a few months ago. It was huge, covered in fur, and growled, and it wanted to eat me. It prefers to eat women. It hides until it's too late for the victim, and then it pounces. I barely escaped, but the shock was so terrible that it took me weeks to recover, and I'm still not back. Don't know if it was a Sasquatch, but the area of Colorado where this happened is known for strange occurrences. Yikes, that was terrible. So a few stories from Colorado. Now we're into Idaho. Next one's from Habeas J 3 years ago. I live in North Idaho and found human-like tracks at least my size, 13, or bigger in the snow around a remote trail, Harrison Lake north of Sandpoint. Okay, so there's a Harrison Lake in Idaho, apparently, in 2020. It was in June during the summer melt, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. After all, barefoot hiking is a thing, but being as the tracks were going through some thick snow, they'd have to be pretty dedicated. Not only do I wish I took a picture, but that I looked a little closer, because if I remember correctly, they were going up the train, but not back down. The snow eventually got way too deep to continue without snowshoes, and there was no way a human could have hiked through barefoot. You can choose to believe me or not, but I'll never forget what I saw, because it legitimately made me question my beliefs looking back on it. Interesting. Next one's Karen Canterbury, 7177, 2 years ago. I'm really enjoying your stories. Even here between the Coeur d'Alene National Forest and the Clearwater Forest in North Idaho. I've heard stories over the years of different sightings and experiences, especially by hunters and loggers. Thank you. Your site is great. And she responds to her own comment. She says, my dad had some experiences. Unfortunately, he's now suffering from a form of dementia, and probably cannot recall them. Next one's Brenda Atkins, 2450, 2 years ago. Greetings and blessings to you and your tribe. I'm Shoshone Paiute. Our reservation is half Nevada/Idaho. We have Bigfoot here also. During a ceremony by our Cree medicine man, he told the ladies and my family to go on a spiritual quest on the mountain on our reservation. The medicine man went back to Montana for a ceremony there. He saw a female Bigfoot sitting nearby the ladies, praying along with them. He told me that they're relatives to Native Americans, indigenous people. Also, a medicine lady within our tribe had shared that they're spiritual beings just as we are, and have lived alongside our ancestors many years ago, and still presently do. All indigenous tribes have respect for the Bigfoot, as they respect the people and leave each other alone. I think and feel they should be left alone. It's sad how the certain non-indigenous people have destroyed the forests and woodlands for money and in materialistic things. There are animals, other beings that live in these places. Turning the forests into national parks was a mistake. Many people missing, and most of the time the blame is being put on the Bigfoot when there are different dimensions and various types of beings, animals and creatures that exist in those places. I was also recently told that because of where the world and time is at presently, the various beings and creatures have been coming out of hiding and will make themselves more known to people. This includes the evil paranormal entities, and it seems to be real and true. I never doubt our medicine people. The message is from the Creator. It's truly unfortunate for those certain people and their families. God bless. So another affirmation of the idea that Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Wildman are human beings related to Native Americans, which is the most explicit version of that I've seen is one of the old Squamish legends of what the Wildmen are, like one of the Squamish origin stories, and I'll link to my video on that in the description. And here's John Mellon again 1 year ago. Sasquatches will give you that feeling of dread without any outside influences to cause that inner anxiety, and feeling of something is terribly wrong. Feeling watched, too. I felt that way once. As we started packing up camp, at Boiling Springs Campground, Crouch, Idaho, nearest town, as we started packing the car, we heard a boulder in the next campsite, slammed hard. It sure scared the crap out of us. The previous year, one appeared like a bear, then hunched. That's when I knew it wasn't a weirdo black bear walking back and forth. Then he stood upright, straight and tall, but enormous and muscular attributes some of his cousins possess. It walked back and forth a dozen times, in the opening of the trees on a path, sometimes stopping and swaying, checking us out while we sat by the campfire. 20 minutes of watching this was entertaining. I didn't bother reacting because he was curious. My favorite visit was from a family of 4 around our campsite, near Sumter, Oregon. Thank you, merci beaucoup, muchos gracias, danke, spasiba, etc. John Mellon has quite the experiences, very interesting. Okay, now we're in Montana. Okay, this comment's from Sandra L's Material Oblivion 7201 2 years ago. In 2018, I was hiking in the Rockies of western Montana. Everything is quiet and normal, when a feeling of being watched starting to develop. Being prior military and police, I lean towards listening to your gut about something. I don't scare easily, not claiming to be Rambo, just saying it takes a lot to get me going. Anyway, the feeling of being watched overcame me so much that I stopped walking, with a large tree to my back, pulled my firearm and started scanning. The next 2 events happened simultaneously. A loud guttural growl came from my left, and a large pine cone landed at my feet, coming from the direction the sound did. It wasn't human, and it wasn't anything native to that area. I've seen and heard, on occasion tracked and charged by every species that lives there. People can believe me or not believe me, but it happened, and no animal in the Rockies throws pine cones. So another story in which something unseen in the forest throws objects at people. Okay, the next one, and I think the last one, is Geraldine Sarah, 8915, 1 year ago. A daughter and I have seen Sasquatch in Waterton Glacier Park, and significant broken tree boughs and trunks, 6 to 8 feet above the ground, offer lots of warning evidence by these creations in the Chief Mountain Highway area overlooking the park. Okay, so I might have put this in the wrong category. Waterton is in southwest Alberta, Waterton National Park. But Glacier National Park is kind of its sister in northern Montana. Let's check out Chief Mountain Highway. Where's that? I think Chief Mountain's in the States. Yeah, Montana, U.S.A. All right. So very interesting stories from the western United States. I think in the next video, I'm going to have to share the stories from the eastern states, which are surprisingly many. I figured the west would have more stories, but the eastern states, I think that video is going to be longer than this one. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Well, when planning out the rest of this video, I came to the realization that I can't just do a western United States and an eastern United States video because Americans don't think of their country like that. This is my Canadian bias coming out. In Canada, we think of Western Canada, Eastern Canada, and then Northern Canada. But in the States, you have the Western states, you have the Midwest, you have the Southeast, you have the Northeast, and I didn't want to make videos on all those different regions because they would have been like 5-10 minute videos, and you guys want big ones. So I'm going to try to get them all in this video. A video on Bigfoot comments from all across the U.S.A. So next we're going to go to the Midwestern states. First comment is from Stephen Fontaine, 8575, 5 years ago. Awesome. I live in Northeast Ohio, and I'm very familiar with the giants that roamed this area. Skeletons, graveyards. However, I had never thought about the little people. How cool. I subscribed, and will most certainly be giving your videos some views. A welcome change from the mass mainstream media brainwashing. Looking forward to reading your books. Next one's Jeffrey Lilly, 4915, 4 years ago. I'm telling you, this seems to be the way of these creatures. We had an encounter with one up at Tom's Mountain, on the border of Indiana and Ohio border by Miami, Whitewater Forest. Wicked beautiful creature. 71/2 foot, 450 to 500 pounds. 4 canine teeth, yellow eyes in the dark. Scariest experience for me and my dad and uncles ever while fishing. Next comments Tony Boyer, 7923, 3 years ago. This gentleman was totally believable. So he's referring to, I'm sure this is a video of a guy I met totally by chance in the Great Sandhills in Saskatchewan, and he told me a Sasquatch story from the Agassiz-Harrison Valley area. I think I mentioned that in the Western video, and it's linked in the description. So this gentleman was totally believable, and told of his encounter just like it happened yesterday. I also found myself standing in a place where a massive Sasquatch had just walked across the road, within 30 yards, right in front of us, in 1977 during the winter here in Missouri. It had shoved a pretty good-sized tree while pushing its way through some brush, once it stepped up out of the ditch line, as it was going into the woods. The branches was still whipping as I pulled up and jumped out to look and listen to where it was headed. Oh my god, I thought, what the hell am I doing here? I could still hear it bulldozing through some super thick brush and trees. I beelined so fast to the truck, I had come out from under my hat, and it was still there a couple days later when I drove by. I never stopped to pick it up. It was like 2 degrees. Freeze the snot in your nose when you first walk outside, coming from a very warm fireplace. Incredible speed in its movement is what I remember most. Well, other than its unnatural size. Wouldn't have been so disturbing if I would have been informed and educated of their very real existence. Next one's Josh the Mediocre, 7824, 3 years ago. I can't even imagine how gigantic these forests are. Never have visited them. Here in Ohio we have sightings of Grassman, Bigfoot, but a little smaller. The Grassman, I'd never heard of the Grassman before. In Salt Fort Lake Park, which is relatively small national park land. But to me, the forests look gigantic. Like they go on forever. I really hope to make it to Canada someday. Regardless, Bigfoot could be everywhere. And he could be more special than we think. Or millions of people are all lying. I don't know, I've never seen one. But I know Canada exists, and I haven't seen it. Next one's One Tara Who, 3 years ago. I am a professional person who has 3 master's degrees. I have personally seen 2 Bigfoot up close in my lifetime. I'm in my 50s and not crazy. They do exist, and are experts at hiding from us. I live in northern Michigan, and they seem to migrate with the steelhead and salmon that run in our rivers in the spring and fall. Many people in my area, especially loggers, have seen them. If you don't bother them, they don't bother you. Next one's Gary Simpson, 1988, 2 years ago. A few years ago, I was camping in an area close to Bigfoot territory in Ohio near Salt Fork State Park. It was late at night, and I had a fire going, and was sitting by it reading a book and drinking a beer. Around 11 p.m., I heard a strange rustling in the trees behind my tent. Then I heard low guttural growls. I stood up, turned around, and as I did, a huge hairy creature emerged from the woods not more than 25 feet from me. It stood 8 feet tall, and had to weigh in excess of 450 pounds. I stood motionless, not knowing what to do when the creature began dictating the narrative. It slowly lifted its right hand and pointed to the beer I was holding in my hand. Oh boy, he fooled me. I realized immediately the beast wanted a cold beer, and why not? It was at least 85 degrees and so humid you could cut the air with a knife. So it strung us along for a bit there. Oh, he's got some more here. I popped a brewski and gave it to him and motioned for him to come sit by my fire. He capitulated, and as we sat by the fire, I lit a cigarette. He instantaneously became agitated and started motioning to my mouth and then to his mouth. Dan the dude wanted a smoke. So I lit one for Bigfoot and we continued socializing, drinking our beer and having a few smokes. Eventually, Bigfoot's eyelids began to droop. My beer was making him sleepy. He arose, waved goodbye, and walked away, whistling as he disappeared into the woods. I haven't encountered the creature again, but after that, I never venture into the woods without my Bud Light and a carton of Marlboros. Hopefully I'll meet the big guy again with his wife and children. If so, I hope the kids are at least 21. No way I'm doing time for serving minors. I got a rep to protect. So I'll give you A+ for creativity, but let's move on to the next one. Canadian mammoth 2 years ago. I think I might know who this is. In addition to the content of this video, there is also a legend of a creature called Smallfoot, which is said to essentially be a black bear with the feet of a human child. It appears in Galen Winter's comedic book, Legendary Northwoods Animals, and one is purported to have been shot in Michigan. Winter's book, as well as the OG Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods, by William Cox, are both great reads, but remember that their content is purely made up and not to be taken seriously. Next one's Greg Zegler, 3850, 1 year ago. I know an old man, 72, of Indian descent. He states that Bigfoot is Neanderthals dressed in animal skins. He states they are very large and tall, thus must have big feet to support themselves. He states that they beat on trees with big sticks, and he gives them no offerings or gifts. He has observed them many times, and says they live in a woods between Harrod and Lima, Ohio. Next one's Cowboy Kelly, 6590, 7 months ago, another very prolific commenter. I seen a Sasquatch traveling with 2 coyotes in eastern Iowa, while camping at 3:30 a.m. in Scott County. Yes, County Park. 2018, September. They do exist. And the last one from the Midwest is J. Moore, 662, 3 years ago. I'm a Native American Indian of the Creek Nation in Oklahoma. My tribe has known of them in Oklahoma from years past, and even to present, especially the Choctaw tribe. You know what the funny thing is about Bigfoots in Oklahoma? Anyone from LaFleur or McCurtain County, Oklahoma, mostly country folk, call them wood boogers or wood apes. The thing is, everyone believes in these wood apes and boogers, but the moment you call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch, all of a sudden they don't exist in Oklahoma and never did. So I think we're going to be hearing more about the wood boogers in the American Southwest, but right now we're going to head over to the American Northeast. And the first comment here is from Matthew Maxey, 1574, 3 years ago. I've seen Sasquatch here in Maine, and yes, absolutely, the makes we see could easily twist a man's body in half. I think he's saying the male we seen could easily twist a man's body in half. That being said, a head pulled off would also be easy. It's too bad we didn't hear how well preserved the bones were, or such, because if it were, one of them there would be a lot of disturbance in both bodies as it grabbed them and tanked off the heads. I think they were murdered by obviously someone who didn't care of money and gold, hence the items, probably the natives. So he's referring to, this must be from a video I did on the legend of the Lost McCloud Mine. I'll link to that in the description. But this is the story that got the Nakani Valley, the valley of the South Nakani River in the Northwest Territories, its gruesome moniker, the Headless Valley. This is in, I think it was 1908, I want to say. And brothers Willie and Frank McLeod, they were 2 Métis brothers, half Indian brothers. And they went prospecting in the Nakani Valley, and they were supposedly top-class woodsmen. They could handle themselves in any situation. And they didn't come back from their prospecting adventure. And when spring came, their brother Charlie went up to look up to the river to look for them, him and a party of northerners. And they found their bodies headless, lying on what was known thereafter as Dead Man Valley, a section of the South Nakani River. And because of that story and other prospectors who subsequently were found headless in the Nakani Valley, the area earned the nickname the Headless Valley. So that's what he's referring to. Oh, and he's got another comment here. Matthew Maxey, 1574, 3 years ago. I'm from Maine. I'm half Mi'kmaq and French-Canadian. I reside here on the mid-coast of our state, and we have run into these creatures, seen them a handful of times. And it is true that the males are massive and fast. Shake my head, the creatures are so fast and cover a distance because of the size they are, and strength and speed unlike anything you ever see. I've been interviewed and have said the same thing in explaining what they look like in size. I said, picture the biggest bull moose you ever see walking on 2 legs towards you. Then you're close to what I see. Next one's from Maine Mermaid, 6596, 3 years ago. Hi there. We live on a remote homestead here in Maine. Our land is surrounded by miles of state land. For over 25 years, we've had a family living here, male and female, who had 2 boys that are in their late teens now. For the most part, they're peaceful and just want to be left alone. Other than leaving our unsellable veggies and fruit and some eggs for them during the growing season, so they'd stop raiding my garden at the coop at night, we don't choose to interact with them. We feel it's best and safest for everyone involved to keep our distance and let them come to us if they want. We are outside working the farm every day and often provide entertainment for them. They like to watch us, the animals, etc., and they're mischievous. They often throw pebbles, acorns, or pine cones, and we just wave towards the woodline and say hello. I talk to them when I'm tending my gardens alone, because they come up close, especially the boys. I'm not sure they understand what I say, but they seem to enjoy it. They hunt deer, squirrels, rabbits, etc., but have never harmed our animals. When the boys were young, they'd come down to watch the horses and goats from the fences and try to pet them, just as human children do. The horses are only afraid at night, when the father's creeping around. He gives off a scary, intimidating vibe that they sense. They have plenty of food nearby, plus a pond and streams. There's an area of our land that they call home, that we learned years ago to avoid. We tell no one about them, not even family and friends. All it takes is one person to tell the wrong person, and we'll have people here trying to hunt one for profit, or they'll get hurt, or worse, attempting to interact with them. A couple of years ago, we had military helicopters flying low over our land for several days, open doors with men sitting in them. We think that someone spotted them and reported it, possibly hunting near or on our land, even though it's posted with many no trespassing and hunting signs. They hate hunting and strangers in their territory, and we can definitely see them scaring the crap out of them and running them off. Luckily, the copters didn't spot them. We feel obligated to protect them. I've only just begun speaking about them anonymously sometimes, because it's important that people know that they do exist and to leave them alone. There need to be laws on the books to protect them, which I believe one state has. The government definitely knows about them. I wish they'd just be honest about it. Amazing, I didn't know there were so many stories from Maine like this. Next one is Discovering Sasquatch Cryptid 8973, 2 months ago. Another very prolific commenter. The North American googway is a devil monkey with a baboon snout and sharp pointed teeth. I know someone who ran into one tobogganing down a hillside in Montana about 40 years ago. There are many cryptids discussed here that still exist but remain elusive in North America. So googway, I think that is a Mi'kmaq term for a sort of Mi'kmaq monster. Let me check my folder on it. I've never done a video on it yet. So I don't have much here, I just have a thing from the files of Ivan T. Sanderson, the godfather of cryptozoology, written by Lauren Coleman. So I think this is something in the files of Michael Swords, who owns a big bunch of Ivan Sanderson's papers. It's they call it the Situ Papers, the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained. That was Ivan Sanderson's old organization. And there's an old piece by Lauren Coleman, a fantastic piece, I remember this, about Wildman of the subarctic. And he briefly references the googway, so that is literally the only thing I have on it right now. And he's got a couple references I have to check out. But that's a video for another time. Next one is Ramblin' Jer 3 years ago. True story, and this is in the States, but worth sharing. About 40 years ago, I was 10, and my younger sister was 8. We had a sighting. We grew up in the rural mountains of western Pennsylvania, and I was always exploring the forest. We were headed towards an old orchard, which had become almost completely encroached upon by the forest, but still had maybe 2 or 3 remaining apples. About 50 feet away, we froze, because there in front of us we seen what I can only say was a Bigfoot. It was picking apples with its back to us, I swear on this. It never turned to look at us, or appeared to care we were even there. I've thought about this and figure it's seen us, knew we were children and wasn't a threat. Surely it heard our approach as we crunched along the forest floor of leaves and sticks, so what else could it be? Anyways, my young instincts told me not to run. Before us was a large oak, probably another 5 to 10 feet further ahead between us and it. We slowly positioned ourselves as to block our view, and then carefully walked until behind it, and hid. To be honest, our foolish child minds thought, if we couldn't see it, it couldn't see us. But that's what we did. I have no idea how long we hid, but when I finally peeked, it was gone. We never heard it leave, or what direction it went. I was only 10, but I know what we seen. I had seen at least 2 bears before, and this was no bear. This had fingered hands and was picking apples, but it was only around 6 feet tall. I don't remember anything else, except how it was reaching for those apples. A few years ago, curious about reported sightings in Pennsylvania, I was pleasantly surprised to learn a boy of 13, reported a sighting probably 15 miles away maybe a month later. If I can find sight again, I'll come back and list it. That's cool. So 2 different sightings within a month in the same place. In western Pennsylvania. Next one's Tin and Bobby 3 years ago. Amerson, have you ever heard of Bigfoot encounters in Atlantic Canada? When I was a kid in the early 80s, my whole neighborhood heard loud screams and roars coming from the woods behind my house. It wasn't anything I have ever heard, since the screams and roars shook your insides. After a few days, the army from base Gagetown showed up. 2 truckloads. They stayed in the woods for 4 nights, 5 days, and then left. They told everyone in the neighborhood that it was a training exercise. I always knew that what I heard as a young boy wasn't anything normal. I lived in a small village called Hampton, New Brunswick. There were 10 houses and a dirt road back then anyway. I always wondered if anyone else ever had sightings or encounters anyway. Love your channel, bro. Keep up the great work. So, Gagetown is a big military base in New Brunswick, and I know there's a lot of stories of Black Panthers actually from there, which is another mysterious animal. So I don't know if the loud screams and roars might have been a Black Panther, or maybe something else. Next one's Everett A4NN 1 year ago. My wife and I saw a Sasquatch in the woods of Lisbon, Connecticut. Believe it or not, I will put everything that I have and everything that I am on that statement. It was 13 years ago, not even a quarter mile from the town landfill. The area is very sparsely populated. It was at night, on a dead, very straight road, and it was on the left side of the road, right at the intersection, and we got within 20 feet of it, and it disappeared literally into thin air, and there was nowhere for this thing to go. I'm not looking to make friends. I'm here telling the truth. So the disappearing into thin air is something I've heard from Mark McPherson. He's a documentarian. He wanted to make a documentary on the Nakani Valley, and if you ever see my footage from the Nakani Valley, it's from him. We had a little deal. I gave him something, and he gave me that footage in return. But he told me also a story. When he was up there trying to film, he talked to some of the local natives, and one of the natives up there from Nahanni Butte, which is a little tiny village at the mouth of the South Nahanni River, I think across on the southern shore, this lady told him that she had seen a Sasquatch in the middle of the South Nahanni River, and she had a rifle, and she fired at it, not like directly at it, but in the water to kind of scare it away, and she said that it vanished into thin air. At least that's the way I understood the story. So that would support the hypothesis that Sasquatch are spiritual beings or interdimensional beings instead of purely flesh and blood animals. Oh, and here's Everett A4NN another time, 1 year ago, another comment. Are reported all over Oklahoma. People need to just realize they're everywhere. My wife and I saw one in the woods of Lisbon, Connecticut. People don't realize New England is 65% woods, and that's probably a low estimate. People don't realize Arizona, Oklahoma have actual trees. Americans are pretty freaking ignorant. In New England, definitely it does have a lot of trees, especially Maine. It's pretty wild there. Next one's Matthew Maxey, 1574, 1 year ago. I'm here in Maine, where on my mother's side we have been here since time began. I'm pretty much a Mi'kmaq half-breed. I, or should I say we, those with me at the time, have encountered them over my lifetime here. We have been yards from a massive male once. While I was driving, he walked down a highway hillside and we met in the middle. He was a massive red-haired giant. Make no mistake of what they are, my friends. What we have here in our woods of Maine are an ancient race of giant that looks like a prehistoric giant man or ancient Indian, and they are terrifying. The sight of them and just the feeling you get altogether isn't right. There is more to these things. And now we're going into the American Southeast. This comment's from Lizzie Sangi, 1602, 5 years ago. Cryptozoologists have been in the southeastern United States, in the big swamps of Mississippi. Tracks have been molded, footage shot, and documentaries made. It's the stories of those that live there on the swamp lines that make believers, though. They're all over the country, and legends go back to Native Americans on both coasts. Justin's Whole House, 5098, 5 years ago. Cool video. I spent a lot of time in the woods in North Georgia hunting and scouting. I camp at night, usually with my hunting partner, but sometimes alone. Both my buddy and I have encounters from Sasquatch in the dark. They made it clear they wanted us gone, but didn't want us to hurt us, although by their displays of throwing large rocks and snapping trees and deadfall logs like toothpicks, It was obvious they could have easily ripped us apart in one swipe. I think a lot of how these creatures treat you is by how menacing you are at heart, and they can sense it. My buddy and I have talked many times about our encounters, and both have agreed that if we could never, ever, ever consider shooting one of these creatures just to kill it, to provide their existence to others. I'd much rather know they exist myself, regardless of what others think. I've seen their tracks many times, and have talked with Native Americans who have had similar experiences with these creatures, and we discussed respect and how these creatures can sense your demeanor and intent. I firmly believe that they are in tune with senses that we humans have long since evolved away from using. The way I've seen their tracks appear and disappear, as if they can vanish and appear at will, is very perplexing. Knowing these things exist is not going to stop me from enjoying my time in the woods, and I'd love nothing more than to interact with these creatures, hopefully without getting my limbs ripped from my body. Next one's from Rick Hale, 4348, 5 years ago. Well-delivered stories. I'm glad I never heard of this valley in my youth. He's referring, I'm sure, to the Nakani Valley. I probably would have gone to see what the fuss was all about. It's still tempting, and my white beard would blend in with the snow. I have run into very large hairy ones a few times. Their body odor is memorable. My gut was in a knot each time, and my sense of danger has never been greater. I could care less if you believe me or not. On one such occasion, my wife and I almost got run over by a group of deer. My wife got a good look at the creature that frightened the deer, for which I scolded her curiosity. I had run into this creature before and tracked it. Its right foot had a disfigured small toe from an old injury. The size dwarfed my size 12 shoe. One night, while fishing at a pool on a river, this creature made its presence known by hurling large rocks to make itself known. It was 2 a.m., and I could see its eyes moving horizontally by my Coleman lantern, no more than 50 feet away on the opposite side of the water. I had an elderly minister friend with me, and he wanted to know what it was. At the time, I told him it was a bear, but he had seen the track and knew better. I did explain it to him after we left the area. He did not dispute my explanation of what it really was, after he had witnessed it himself. I knew beforehand that it frequented the area, but did not expect this ordeal. Nothing smells like this creature's body odor. I have always known not to lose it and run from any animal. I did once when a panther screamed from a tree above me on Swanee River sinkhole in the middle of the night. I ran into a bunch of brambles and got stuck long enough to get my fright under control. That cat followed me out, and even followed my truck as I was leaving. I was pissed at myself for panicking, but if you hear a panther scream just above you in a peaceful, dark night, it cuts right into your very core. My younger brother in his teens and my father all scattered into the trees and brush. It was a comical sight in retrospect, but a stupid reaction. You had to be there. I have told these things to only a few people. At my age, it doesn't bother me if somebody believes me or not. I have noticed many people tend to bury things they can't explain, and that frightens them. I suppose that's human, but I have had many strange experiences over a long life, and I like having a sense of wonder, especially since I survived these events. The most dangerous creature I have ever met are people, and thankfully I have never had to kill one, although there have been some close calls. I tend to get more aggressive when challenged. My wife of nearly 40 years said I am scary when something happens, because I am normally friendly and not liking violence. She has never feared me for any reason. She told me a few years ago that was one of the reasons she married me. She knew no one would dare harm her. Men should instinctively protect their families. I've done enough reminiscing. I'm home alone with my Jack Russell. God bless. Next one's JSOI6NN 3 years ago. I saw one in Lewis County, West Virginia in 2001. I was doe hunting, riding my four-wheeler around a small ridge. I stopped and left my bike running, as it would camouflage my steps to the edge of the ridge, so I could look over because I always saw deer down there. I slowly peek over the edge with my 270 at my shoulder, looking through the scope with both eyes open. 4 or 5 deers take off the hauler. I take my rifle off my shoulder and see movement again right in front of me, about 75 yards. A man stands up in a ghillie suit. He was sitting at the base of a large sycamore tree. He is quite large, very solidly built man. He has no gun, no orange, no boots. His face is painted a weird color. Looking down at him, we stare for another 3 to 5 seconds. I look back at my running four-wheeler, and I realize what I have seen is not normal. I look back and see nothing. I get on my bike and ride off, always wondering what or who that was. Next one's David Ponzago, 8811, 3 years ago. I have a large amount of forest woodland in North Louisiana, and we have encountered multiple Bigfoots over the years, and have a photo and video proof, and one particular Bigfoot we have seen and photographed has a face like a howler monkey. He is the only one like this. Even his fur color is different. He is also much larger than the others. He also seems older, and we have always just found him rather strange. Next one's Catman7153, 3 years ago. I don't know why people are so overcome with fear upon encountering these beings. I had an encounter 5 years ago in the Ozarks. I was camping and it was very cold. The dude, at least 7 feet tall and 300 pounds, waded across the river where I was camping and approached my camp. I offered him a cup of coffee, but he just grunted, snapped off a 4-inch dead cedar tree trunk, and walked off with it. I took pics of the tree trunk, but didn't have time to grab my camera to take his pic. Just a normal day camping in the Ozarks. True story. Days after, I felt I was being watched, and called out to him to come and visit, but he never did. Next one's Gene Lawson, 9133, 9 months ago. What if I told you that I had discovered a new type of Bigfoot in Alabama? It's a dog-headed, black-winged, like a bat-human-type body, 13 feet tall, large hands and feet. I saw it up close climbing a scubnine vines in broad daylight around 20 years ago. I mean, that's a pretty sensational story, but it does evoke... Susan Allison was a pioneer in the Okanagan country and in the Similkameen country in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And she spoke to the Indians there. She was always interested in their legends, and the Okanagan Indians told her that there was a kind of... They called it... she called it a devil, but they called it Saniapu, and it was described as a creature having a body of a human, a face like a deer, and wings like a bat. So as crazy as that story sounds, it is consistent with at least one native legend that I know about. Next one's Frank Short, 7798, 3 years ago. Frank here in Louisiana. 3 of us witnessed a Sasquatch walk out across a sandbar in broad daylight. One of my friends, my most outspoken skeptic, called me last year saying an 8-foot-tall, hairy black thing ran across the road, 50 feet in front of him in North Louisiana. He told me years prior, no such thing. Well, he sure as hell believes it now. And for all the know-it-alls here that know jack shit, why are you all here? No response necessary or wanted. You don't matter. What you believe exists in this world has zero difference in what does exist. Next one's Cosmic Backwoods, 3 years ago. In the southern parts of the U.S.A., the game wardens and wildlife officers deny that there are any mountain lions when people see them all the time and catch them on camera. In an episode of Sasquatch Chronicles, a story is related where a woman in Florida shot and killed a Sasquatch. The neighbor saw it firsthand, and the woman was charged with discharging a firearm in the city, hunting without a license, and for killing a black bear out of season. All I gotta say is if you kill one, don't tell the authorities. Next one's Diane 2 Cats, 2 years ago. I have encountered one back in 1974, west side of Military Trail, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I was out after midnight on my horse during a full moon, when all of a sudden my horse refused to go any further along the power line road. On one side was a canal, and on the other side were strawberry and cornfields. Back then this was undeveloped, and the Corbett area was a few miles west. All I know is when I stood up, it was as tall or taller than me and my horse, and the smell was worse than anything I'd ever smelled before or since. It seemed to be hiding in the wooded side and blended in perfectly. My horse wanted to have none of this, and we quickly turned around and galloped off fast back to the ranch. I never took night rides alone after that. So another anecdote describing a terrible stench that these things emit. Alright, next comment's from John Melland 1 month ago. I've seen dozens of red, glowing, bioluminescent eyes, some white, yellow, green, and once seen by my grandmother as blue-eyed Sasquatch peering into her cabin window. Eureka, California, 80s and 90s. She heard them but wasn't afraid of them at all. Neither am I. I really love our tribes of hairy people. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Next one's Glenn Witt, HS7RH, 1 year ago. We have more than one living near our backyard here in Florida. I seen one about 80 to 100 foot away one morning between 7 or 8 foot tall. Its chest was about 3 foot thick, orange hair, black eyes and face, and walking like it was floating. My son seen the big one night pushing trees through the woods. I found 29-inch footprints, and the ground did shake with each step it took. We estimated it to be 12 to 14 foot tall, and it smelled like a sewer. I know because I slept in a tent in my son's backyard for a year after my wife died from COVID-19 when the pandemic began. I love nature, and sleeping in the tent is the only thing that gave me happiness. And yes, the Sasquatch I saw telepathically told me, as I stared into its eyes, "You will let me walk past you, and I will not hurt you." And so I did. If you visit Florida and want to see a Sasquatch, just skip Disney World and go camping. I've had many contacts with them. I suggest don't interact, just observe. Good video. Next one's Hi, Brazil, 1 year ago. I saw them when I was young in North Florida, Tallahassee to be specific, yes, the city. 2 separate occasions at the same location. One was in a tall pine tree, blatantly ignoring me. It was one of those situations where I knew he knew I could see him, but he was standing still as a statue. I asked the adults about him. They responded by laughing at me in my imagination. Not too long after, I saw what appeared to be a pretty wild little gathering/party of these creatures, various colors, sizes, and shapes. The back door had been standing open, and I was running in and out, playing like little kids do, when I heard music, but not music as we know it. I managed to find the source when I saw movement between the open door and its frame. Lots of blinding bright colors and light, with these creatures dancing around in a circle. I ran around to the other side of the door to get a better look, but they weren't there. So I came back and looked through the crack again. There they were, still having a good time, oblivious to me. My mom was nearby, so I thought she needed to know about it, but again, kids and their imaginations. She didn't even get up to come see. She remembers that time in our lives when she stayed at that house. My dad had just left us for a new family. We were living with friends. I can't say it was all that emotional. I wasn't exactly attached or even aware that I had a father, or even what a father was supposed to do. Probably because he never spent time with me, never bonded or anything. But for the rest of the family, it was emotional upheaval. I think that was probably what helped open the door. My mom would have visions of impending disaster or accidents, just in time to stop whatever it was from happening. But after a while, it all kind of faded away. Maybe it's just human survival, to help us get out of spiritual turmoil. I just know that what I saw was real. These things are real. They're everywhere. Some are good and some are bad. Consider it akin to ministering spirits that are talked about in the Bible, and demons. You don't thank them and you don't give them offerings. They know their place, which is why in folklore, thanking these helpful spirits is exactly what will make them leave and never return. Contrary to that is giving them offerings. That's on the same level as trying to tame a bear. Only you are the bear, they get a kick out of owning you, controlling you. They sort of flaunt it as a status symbol because they know, even if you don't, that they are beneath us. We can command them, we have the authority to do so. We just don't know it. That's why you have to be careful with all that witchcraft stuff. You do not want to be their dancing bear in a demonic circus. So that's an interesting take on the nature of the Sasquatch as a spiritual being. Next one is David Bacara, 5044, 4 months ago. I once interviewed a man who, with his whole family beside him, told me an incredible tale of something he witnessed as a teenager in Ellijay, Georgia. He was with 4 friends in his van, and drove up to a quiet place on Talona Ridge. Only minutes after they parked, still seated in the van, and before anyone ever got a cold beverage, one of the girls started to scream, followed by the others in the van. When the driver, our witness, turned to see what they were all looking at, in the place of where his neighbor was sitting sat a large, hairy man, looking around in shock, as if to think, oh God, they can see me. When he reached for the door handle to jump out, he inadvertently turned on the dome light. He glanced back now that all the lights were on, and his neighbor kid friend was back, giving the same shocked look. 2 of the girls never came back to school, as their mother had to take them to Atlanta to get therapy, so they could sleep. The neighbor kid and his family moved a couple of weeks after this happened. Hell of a story from a serious man. That one still haunts me. So that is one of the weirdest Wildman stories I've ever heard. So it's a human being who turned into a wild man? Is that what this is? Very weird. Next one's David Ponsego, 8811, 4 months ago. In North Louisiana, on my 600-acre timber property, I and my family have seen multiple Bigfoot, a family of them, multiple times, and also twice a thunderbird, and while not a cryptid, 3 times we have seen mountain lions, which should not be here. And now we're going to get into, there's a commenter named Stephen Steele. He has quite a few very long comments, so we'll read them here. Stephen Steele, 3 years ago. We had a young lone male living on my grandparents' 200 acres. I saw signs and heard him plenty of times, always just out of sight. From age 9 till I was 21. When my mom, aunt, and grandma saw him at a 7-foot-tall height, Mom and my aunt freaked out, scared stiff. When they finally got Mama's attention to him, she said, "It's okay, he won't hurt us, but we best get back in the house," as they went for a walk after eating Thanksgiving dinner. Mom said Mama and he won't hurt us, just as calm as if she had said, "I'm going to church." She knew he was living down in the lower swampy wetlands of their land. explaining why on every holiday she heaped a lot of food on a tray and had me take it down the hill just below the house and put it on a well pump house foundation. And all my years playing on the land, he never once showed any threat to us. I think we kind of grew up together. I will go on to visit the old place and see if he might still be around. I do know there is a troop living on a large lake a few miles from there. We call them boogers down here in the south. Ours ain't nearly as bulky as y'all's are up there, though very muscular. They are more like NBA players, tall and lanky. I did have him steal a few deer kills of mine over the years. I always left him the heart, liver, and kidneys, though he ate the guts too. So now Stephen Steele is talking to Rick Hale 4348, whose comment we covered a little while ago. And he says, yes, though at the time I remember from as early as Easter egg hunts on up till not too long ago, hearing whoops whenever I ventured into the edge of the woods on this lake I wrote of. I ended up calling them kung fu squirrels, as they reminded me of Bruce Lee's sound he made in the movies on TV. I eventually realized all these years what I had been hearing. I found very evident pathways. Once I knew what I was looking for, and very old prints here and there. Where they walked along are mostly in the water's edge. The land my grandparents owned was less than 3 to 5 miles from this lake. I don't know what role this young male had. The only prints they ever found, and that was the only one very good, one about 14 inches, and 3 very eroded partial prints seemed to be from that one male. The first time it was seen when I was around was 1979, when several of my cousins began screaming and crying as they ran from where they were playing behind a tractor barn. I didn't see him, but only ran with them, being the oldest of the 6 of us there. 3 saw him, watching us playing. I remember us busting into the front door, Mama exclaiming, "Lord, what's wrong with y'all?" The 3 crying we saw a big hairy monster looking at us, from the corner of the barn. To this my uncles and aunts, setting after we had finished our Thanksgiving meal, all laughing and saying, "Y'all are scaring yourselves, there ain't no such things as monsters." I vividly remember my Mama saying, "Bert," in a tone that struck me even then. Papa went and loaded his shotgun, and stood out back for a while, long enough for my 9-year-old mind to think, if there is no such thing as monsters, why is Papa out here with his gun? There are many things over the years that finally let me put 2 and 2 together. Before I looked for, or in some cases things made sense, that there was very much such a thing as that we could call monsters. But sorry so long. Hope all is well. I used to live in Lafayette, Georgia. There in Walker County, the northwest corner of Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. Was your wife's family near there? And he's got a last response to Rick Hale, 4348, who he's having a conversation with. He says, "Sorry to keep bugging you, Rick. Honestly, though I have been called crazy among other things, I don't mind. I'm not sure if I would believe some of the people's encounters or stories of close brushes with something unseen, but very much loud and violent towards the poor trees it decides to maul. I've had one, though I don't think it was the only on our property. At the time, I lived a quarter of a mile or a bit more from Mama and Papa. Princess, my female Rottweiler, had to do her business, around 3 a.m. I leashed her up and went to our front yard. It was misting rain. She was sniffing around to find the right spot, when she stopped and stared across the road at the woods. These were next to a small mobile home village. These woods butted against State Highway 29, and then into more woods and homes. But pre-web, I looked at a map, and these woods went on through populated along this wide green belt. Anyhow, she went back to sniffing. Why they must pee just at the right spot is beyond me, and my bladder is very unselfish. She again raised her head, looking and smelling. Then she gave a low gruff. I said, "What is it, girl?" Then I was beginning to get wet. I urged her to hurry up. Less than a minute later, she snapped her head up and bared her teeth, with her hair hackles went up. She gave the most vicious snarl I'd ever heard her do. Then at the edge of the wood, this very low growl began. This growl's base was so low. I felt it vibrating my lungs and stomach. My insides felt like they were moving. This raised in pitch all along. I'm feeling this in my eardrums. Flutter like a pressure change will make them do. It got higher until it was the pitch of a tornado or air raid siren. It was so intense. The only way to give you an idea of its presence is you ever stood next to a train's engine right in front of its horn. At this point, Princess was pulling me back to the door. I got in, dropped the leash. She went to the bathroom in the center of the house. I ran and got my 9mm. Yeah, it's all I had. This thing I can't even say it was a Sasquatch, but it went between mine and my neighbor's house. It then repeated this scream twice or more, and then I figured it got to the cow pasture across the road from my grandparents' land and stopped. I'm pretty sure it didn't, as I cracked a window and lay on the floor listening for it. Now it may have been our boy out wandering around, but we have never heard him being scary. If I had needed a BM or a P, I would have in my pants. The low bass alone would have made my bowels go. If you ever get a chance, check out Us and Them. The man had a Neanderthal skull, fleshed out, but told the person to forget the idea of it looking like us. To remember they could have been covered with hair. So he's referring to, there's a documentary called Us and Them. It's about this guy has this, like an anthropologist, has a controversial theory that the reason that we're so scared, humans are so scared of human-like monsters is because our ancestors were hunted by Neanderthals, and he kind of painted a picture of them as these hairy, Sasquatch-like creatures with big fangs and carrying spears. I've never watched the documentary, but I know about it. So to go on with what he's saying, to remember they could have been covered with hair, being they came about from living on the edge of the Ice Age in colder climates. What the artist came out with looks very much like the type we have here in the South, more chimp-like with canines. We have had reports of the patty type here, for the most part, and the one on our land. They are more chimp-like, muscular but lanky, as Mom said, like an NBA player. Check out the them and us Neanderthal likeness. Thinking on this. We and they interbred. They were built thicker than us. I think we bred and killed them off. They once used fire, but soon learned fire makes smoke and light that showed us where they were. Eventually the ones who knew the skill of making fire died off. Even the skill of knapping stones to points and knives was too noisy. They retreated into the deepest, most unlivable areas, places we seldom went. The breeding continued, but probably Neanderthal males took human females, forced them to mate. I'd imagine human females having a young half-Neanderthal baby that escaped back to her people. The baby, if left to nature, very well may have been taken and given to a Neanderthal female, with a baby to nurse as well. I know all this is conjecture, but possible. I do believe as far as them killing humans. Well, like us, there are good and bad. I can see a male or female that lost its mate or child to a human bullet, wanting very much to kill any human it can get its hands on. And then there is the rouge males drove out of the troop, either because it fought the alpha male for leadership, or them and lost. He now lacks social contact, is sexually frustrated, and hates the world. Their version of the clock tower sniper. Finally, there's the small family. Their land has been stripped of trees, all the food drove away. It's winter, the female has just given birth. She needs every calorie she can get. There's sickness among their other one or two children, like a human in this case. The only possible food is the plow horse or family dog. Given the choice between looking the baby and children, taking a human that's easy to hunt and kill will be a choice taken every time, by the alpha and the new mother. So it sounds like this guy has a theory that his grandmother's and mama's land had a Sasquatch living on it, or I guess they call them boogers in the American Southeast, or swamp apes. I've heard that's another term used. But he's saying that there is another thing that lived there that's different, and he thinks his theory is that it's a Neanderthal. If you want to check out my video on Neanderthals in Canada, I'll include that in the description. So those are all the stories I've had on my channel, or at least the ones that I found, on first-hand Bigfoot encounters in the United States. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.